My name is Anna. I'm the co-founder of Family Recovery Specialists, which is an intensive outpatient treatment program for adolescents and adults. And we also do interventions and clinical placements when a person needs a higher level of care. We're able to help find the best program to meet the person's needs. I'm a licensed mental health counselor as well as a master's level certified addiction professional. And then we've got some other initials on there, which just means that I'm also a certified intervention professional as well too. So as I said, we do interventions. It's not always like the kind that you see on TV that, we sneak up on somebody and take them away. Interventions really work in different ways. So what I bring to you from experience is I've been in the field for about 15, 16 years and working mostly with teenagers and with young adults, and that's really where my passion lies. But also work with adults. So that's just a little bit of my background and what I bring to you. Very grateful to be here with you this evening. So I'm going to start with just a real quick recap of a couple of the last sessions because it's an important foundation for what we're going to build on today, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've done this before. And I just want to start real quickly with discussing the young brain. The brain between the ages of 13, 14, up until about the age of 25 is when the brain goes through a huge growth spurt and the maturation process. The brain during these ages, it develops really from back to front. And what that means is that the reward system of the brain is fully developed by the time someone's about 13 years old. So that part that lights up and tells you, oh, I really like this stuff is fully done. And as we go moving forward, the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function, it's that part that allows us to think before we act. And now as I look back, and my mom used to say to me, what's wrong with you? Didn't you think? And I just didn't know what to say. I can now say, obviously not, and I couldn't. Sorry. So if I would have known that back then, it would have been a good justification, but I didn't. So I know it now. And that ability to hit the brakes also, when we get that bad idea is about the age of 25. So just a little bit on addiction. Addiction is a disease. It's a progressive disease. A person does not, from the first time that they drink or the first time that they smoke weed or the first time that they do anything are automatically an alcohol dependent or a substance dependent person. It builds over time. And what we have found and we do know is that the 67% of people that develop a problem with substances did begin using as teenagers, okay? So this is when the process starts. The brain is growing. It starts getting hardwired into the brain as something that I need to continue in my life. So we have that. And then the next group here, 18 to 25, 26% of people that begin using in these ages end up developing a problem. So again, it's a process. It moves from, experimentation, social. We start to experience what the internal changes are, what those feels like, what we start getting, the person starts becoming accustomed to what it feels like to be high, what it feels like to be under the influence. Then it starts going into necessary, which means that in order for a person to feel kind of baseline, and feel okay, the substance needs to be in the system. And then we get into abuse where we start to see interference in life, led into addiction where life really begins to deteriorate and can look like many different things and can get very, very precarious. So that's the process of addiction. So now I'm going to go directly into what tonight's topic is and marijuana. And there's a few things that we clearly do know about marijuana. And what we know is that most marijuana use begins in adolescence. We've got about 78% of the 2.4 million people who began using in the last year were between the ages of 12 and 20. And I'll tell you, in our local community, here's where I'm not going on any studies or anything, I'm just going on me and what I hear and what I see. The most common age I hear when I evaluate people that are smoking marijuana, it doesn't matter what age they are right now, but the age that they started using, the answer I hear the most is 12 and 13. And that's the first time that it's tried. It doesn't mean, again, that it was a daily use at that point, but that's what's coming across. And in the recent past, I'm hearing more 12s and 11s, which we're talking, 7th, 8th grade, is what I'm hearing more and seeing more as time is progressing closer up until today. What we also know is that as the perception of harm is reduced and it's seen as something less dangerous, the chances of somebody trying it is going to increase. And that kind of makes sense, right? If we don't see something as bad, we're going to be more likely to, if we're curious, to try it than if we do see it as bad. And every day, statistically, it's about 3,200 teenagers that use marijuana for the first time. So when I evaluate somebody, and when I evaluate somebody, they come to me. It's not like I'm going out in the community and finding people and bringing them in. This is somebody that is brought to me, and it's usually they're either bring themselves or parents bring them, and we're talking about marijuana. I get a lot of objections, and the most common things I hear about why marijuana is not a big deal: it's natural, it's a plant, God gave it to me, the shamans use it, it's good for cancer, it's good for morning sickness, it's legal, I drive better when I can focus better, I have ADD, I have depression, I have anxiety, and it helps. I think I've heard this a few times, right? Did I kind of go down this list, right? No one has ever died from a weed overdose. Absolutely, I have yet to hear, and if I told you that if I knew somebody that died from a weed overdose, I'd be lying to you. Why do people not overdose on weed? Because weed, marijuana, does not affect the brainstem. Every other substance, including alcohol, affects the brainstem, and the brainstem is what controls everything that, thank God, we don't have to think about. Because I'm standing up here and I'm not thinking about, I need to make my heart beat, I need to make my lungs breathe, I need my kidneys to filter, this jug of water I just drank, right? We're not thinking about that stuff. It's automatic, and marijuana does not affect that part of the brain, but every other substance does. Weed is not addictive. I'm going to go through and explain, and I'm going to counter each of these. So as we go through, I'm going to talk to you about what addiction is, what it looks like, and who it affects. It's not a gateway drug. We're going to talk about that too. Oh, the medicine. I hear that all the time, right? It's medicine. So what condition do you have? I broke a nail. Oh, took the pain away? Yeah, great, right? And then you ask what other condition. I had a boy one day tell me, well, it helps with my morning sickness. And I'm like, well, if you're pregnant, you've got bigger problems, right? So there are some medicinal components, and I'm going to get into what those are to distinguish. I never drive drunk, but we have more and more people driving high every day. So it's great that people don't drive drunk, and I think that that's a message, I'll go back just to my youth that I've been hearing since I was a kid. So a lot of people don't drink and drive. We still have people that drink and drive, but we're having more and more people driving high, and it's legal. And that one, I would hear about it even when it wasn't legal in Florida, but I'm going to throw it in here because, it's legal. I'm willing to roll with that one. So I'm going to go into what are some of the common methods of marijuana use. These are some of the most common, right? We've got our joint and our grinder, and for those of you that don't know what a grinder is, it basically, you put the marijuana in there, you grind it, and it makes it able to be rolled, okay? The blunt, the bowl, the bong, and a bubbler, and these are just different ways of ingesting it. And what does that mean? We are now looking at the effects of the way that the substance is being ingested, because it does manifest different things, and it also does manifest different effects, and affects the drug screens based on the way that a person is using. Now, insofar as the potency, I averaged it at 20 to 35%. There's going to be some that's 12%. There's some that's going to be 40%. So I just wanted to try and hold to the median of the whole range. So there's different potencies that come along with it. And just to give you a comparison, back in the 60s and 70s, right, when it was the time of peace, love, happiness, the hippies, marijuana was about 2 to 3% THC. THC is the active ingredient of the psychosis piece, the psychoactive piece of the marijuana. So it's much stronger. So when we look at the device, the way that it is used, it's going to vary with the potency. We have your straight joint, which can be anywhere from 20 to 35, but remember, some is going to be less and some may be a little bit more. It's going to vary depending on the strain. The hybrid, which is with tobacco, it magnifies the effect because of the nicotine that's mixed with it. You have the blunt, which is the cigar paper, and just to kind of go back in case, it's this one right here, that people will take out the nicotine from it, empty it out, and then use the paper as the blunt. We have the pipes and the bowls, which, you know, a little bit smaller than the clicker. You know, that is smaller, people, you know, can hide it easier. We have the bong, which allows for more potent hits. That's this one right here. It's more direct. And then we have the bubbler, which also has bigger effects because it has water in it, so it brings down the temperature. It's not quite so hot, so people can take longer hits. Now we go into more dangerous types. They're all pretty dangerous, right? But these are even stronger. When we look at dabbing, and I'm going to show you what pictures of that is on the next slide, it's basically considered what they're calling the crack of pot use. It's in wax form, and then the wax is melted. And in essence, it can be 4 times more powerful than a joint, and one hit on a dab can be the equivalent of 4 to 5 joints in one hit. These folks we're seeing in our office, and they're coming in after major psychotic breaks, and not really coming back from them. Recently, you know, in the recent past, we had somebody who the psychotic break was related to the fear of, and I may have said this in one of my other lectures, that his mother was trying to kill him by putting ammonia and all the clear liquids in the house. So he went through the house getting rid of all the water, including water in the toilets, hoses, anything liquid in the refrigerator. Somebody else that accused his 80-year-old grandfather of selling crack out of the house called the police on his grandfather, and it was all psychosis. It was all psychosis-based because of dabbing. And unfortunately, we're seeing much more of that as well, too. Then we've got the vaping, and a lot of stuff going on with the vaping, and I think we talked about that a little bit the last time too. We've got the Juuls, we've got vape cigarettes, we've got the mods, and all these different types of equipment here to use for vaping. And people are vaping THC oil, hash oil in these vapes. And what the vapes are doing is that one inhale off of a vape is 95% of the inhale is THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, versus about 12% in one hit of a joint or a blunt. And then we have the edibles. Edibles are, once a person eats brownie or something that has marijuana on it, we don't really have a way of knowing how much marijuana is in it if it's homemade. It could be a little sprinkle, or it could be, you know, two tablespoons full. There's no way of knowing how much is in there. And what's happening to people is that they'll eat a brownie and they'll be like, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything. And then they'll go and they'll have another brownie. And then it kind of catches up to them, right? Because what happens? This is stronger and it lasts longer because it goes to the liver before it's metabolized through the liver. So the liver changes the delta 9 THC to 11 hydroxy THC, creating a combined effect of the two. I'll tell you what happened once. I had a client a number of years ago who he was studying in the University of Israel, and he came home for summer break. And he was the youngest of 12 children. So his parents were a little bit older at this time. So he came home, his mom and dad were at work, he baked some brownies because he was going to go to a party later on that night, and he baked the brownies with marijuana and left them on the kitchen counter to cool. Exactly. Mom and dad get home from work, and mom's like, oh wow, there's brownies, great. So she goes and she cuts a piece of the brownie and eats a brownie. Little while later, mom's not feeling all too well. So she's like, oh my God, I don't know what's wrong with me. My heart is pounding. I'm short of breath. She's sweating, so mom and dad are, husband and wife are talking, what do we do? And dad, her husband's like, let's go to the hospital. So they go to the hospital. They go to the emergency room. They bring her in. They start running a whole bunch of tests and checking on, okay, your heart's a little accelerated, this is going on, that's going on, and they keep coming back, we don't know, and then at one point the doctor comes in the room and closes the curtain, right, and says, okay, we know what's going on, and she's like, what is it? And the husband holds her hand, we'll make it through this together, hon, right, and he says, you're high. There's marijuana, active marijuana in your system. Husband, let's go over here. Since when have you been smoking pot? She's like, how dare you? I've never done this in my life. To come to realize that it was the brownies she got into at home. Her son ended up in treatment the next day, by the way, because they realized that he had a problem because this is something else I hear very common. It's like, what's wrong with my kid? Are they stupid? And absolutely not. This isn't about stupidity. What happens is it becomes so normal that it didn't occur to him to not have the brownies on the counter. It's like people that walk in and leave their bowl or their bong on the dining room table. I've heard that from parents too. Like, really? This is, they're stupid. They're not. You do the abnormal long enough, it becomes normal. It would be like me walking in the door, because the first thing I do when I walk in my door is I drop my purse and my keys in the same place so I know the next morning where it is, because if not, I'll lose it. It's just that common, and I don't think about it. It's just that automatic. So there are the dangers in this. So here's what the dab looks like, and this right here is the gadget it's smoked from, and yes, that is a blowtorch. We have had people that after taking a dab that will want to do a second dab and end up injuring themselves with the blowtorch and burning their faces and burning eyebrows and all of these kinds of things because they are that high in the moment from the dab that this is causing secondary injuries with the marijuana use. And this right here, this is really what happens with a lot of times with people dabbing. Had a young lady I evaluated not that long ago, 16 years old. She remembers that she went to a party with some friends. She remembers being at the party. She remembers that the group she was with brought out a dab. She remembers taking a hit off of a dab. Next thing she remembers, she wakes up in the front bushes in front of her house, naked from the waist down, not knowing how she got home, not knowing what happened to her, not knowing anything. And she went out to a party. But you know what people say? It's just pot. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? I don't know. It's not just pot, is it? And like this, I can tell you stories and stories. And when people say it's just pot, it's not just pot. It's what it does and the effects that it has. And then we have the edibles. And I don't know about you all, but can you see kids getting into that? Little kids have ended up in emergency rooms because they've gotten into brother or sister or mom or dad's candies and their edibles, right? So we really got to protect and you got to make good choices because it's not just pot anymore. This isn't the pot from the 60s or the 70s. In the 60s and 70s, people wouldn't go to rehab for pot. I did a bunch of research and I couldn't find it. Nowadays, we've got people going to rehab for quote unquote just pot because the potency on this and where it's headed is incredible. It's incredible. And with all the legalization and everything else, the perceived harm drops. Therefore, more people are trying it and trying it younger. So we've got the vapes, and this I found just extremely disturbing, and I don't know if you all will agree with me on this or not, but here this was a news piece on NPR where it talks about this gentleman, Chris Folkert, who was selling vape pens out of the trunk of his car, and now he has, over 6,000 square feet of real estate selling vape pens, right? But listen to his quote. "You could never get your mom to hit a bong," he says, "but your mom would potentially hit a G-pen. My mom did, my grandmother did too, and I have God-fearing Christian grandparents from the Midwest. When they tried it, I knew I was on to something." Is anybody appalled by that, or was it just me? I don't know who would be proud of saying I got my grandma to hit a bong or a vape pen. It's really, it's pretty impactful, for lack of a better term. So we got to be careful with these two, because we don't know what people are smoking in there. It could be anything. It could be straight flavored oil. It could be nicotine. It could be hash oil. It could be CBD oil. It could be THC oil. We don't know, and people are walking around all over the place smoking these things, and it's happening a lot in the schools. Can we hold the questions till the end? Would that be okay? Yeah. So what does THC actually do in the brain? THC, we have natural cannabinoid receptors in our brain, and one of the functions of that is to help us to relax. So what happens? Initially, marijuana may help young people calm and relax. People that might be anxious or what have you, in the beginning they find that it helps a little bit, that it helps to calm them down. But what happens over the course of time is that marijuana is 4 times stronger than the natural brain chemicals that we have that already does this. So what does that mean? It means that we start becoming accustomed to being high for the calming effect, that when that high is not there, our own ability to self-soothe and to self-calm is greatly reduced. And if it's greatly reduced, we're going to go back to going to the outside to find what it is that's going to help calm us, therefore depleting our own natural ability to do that anymore. And that's what marijuana does. And over time, the brain's natural ability to calm is decreased. And it reaches the point the person is no longer able to, quote unquote, relax without having marijuana. Part of evaluations that I do with people too, I try to see what purpose the marijuana is serving at the point that they have come to see me. And I have people tell me I use it to sleep. Okay, all right, so here we go. You're calming to go to sleep at night, boom. I use it to make the food taste better. Marijuana doesn't make food taste better. It might make you hungrier, but it doesn't make the food taste better. But they've gotten, again, so accustomed to that for me to eat that food that I really like, and I'm going to go to pizza or chocolate because those are my 2 faves, you got to be high to fully enjoy it at this juncture. Well, I smoked before I went into the movie. Well, why? Because the movie's better when I'm high. And then everything becomes better when I'm high. And then eventually the reason becomes, well, I smoked because it's a day that ends in Y. And the person is really high all day long. And it ends up building over time, because remember how I started is that this is a process. This isn't something that happens from one moment to the next. It goes building over time. And it usually takes parents about a year to learn that their child is smoking marijuana. And it's not because parents aren't paying attention. It's because in the beginning it's hidden so well. And then you do the abnormal long enough, it becomes normal and it becomes more habitual and it becomes more common, right? That you start seeing signs, but it's usually about a year has been, what I have found in that before a parent finds out. Does that make sense how this all happens? Okay, so I'm going to show you some brain scans now. These are SPECT scans. When we talk about is marijuana addictive and, damages and what have you, these are SPECT scans done by the Amen Clinic. And this is, right here, we're looking at a 28-year-old with 10 years of marijuana use, mostly on the weekends. So we'll say 2 times a week, right, for about 10 years. So we see some damages to the prefrontal cortex. And what's the prefrontal cortex? Our executive and our judgment. So poor choices, logic, things of that nature definitely get impaired. And the way you see this is you see it and you also hear it in the way people justify and kind of make connections that you're like, this doesn't make sense, but it does to the individual. Is part of where that comes in. And here we have another one of a healthy brain and an 18-year-old daily user of marijuana. Once again, we see, the impairments and in the temporal lobes. And then the last one I'm going to show you here is on the prefrontal cortex once again, of where you see the damages. And here's somebody using 4 times a week for 2 years. And you look at it, and it's really not that such a long period of time when you look at it, right? 2 years. But clearly we can see that it does have impacts on the brain. As much as people say it's not addictive, it doesn't do any damage, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. I mean, here you got it, right? You see it. So now I'm going to get into the medicinal components. So let's really talk about this, because I've had people tell me that I am a mean and evil person because I don't want people to get well, because I'm against marijuana. And I will tell you that I'm all about people getting well. I'm in healthcare. So we'll start with that. Mental health care. And I'm all about some of the properties of this that can be helpful for people. It's just about doing it in the right way. So let's get into what this is here. THC, once again, is the active ingredient in marijuana that has the psychoactive substance, the psychoactive component. So THC, mild analgesic, antioxidant. I'm all about anti-cancer stuff, right? Everybody in here too? Let's fight cancer? Yep, for sure. All about it. THCV is being researched right now for diabetes and appetite suppressant. Yes, believe it or not, suppressant, not just the munchies. The CBDs is what gives the munchies. This component actually here is a suppressant. So it does have both of those components. And then we have THCA, anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferate, and antispasmodic. MS, seizures, thank you. The word was coming to me in Spanish and not in English for some reason. I'm all about helping these folks, right? I mean, these poor people must suffer so much. So now we're going to look at the CBDs, because this is the medicinal components of it. This is where really the strengths lie in where the properties are that are helpful to people. The CBD is the one that has the most promise. It may inhibit cancer cell growth. Can you imagine stopping cancer? That's awesome. All about it. All about it. CBDA is the highest anti-inflammatory. So while we have anti-inflammatory up here too, this is actually better than this for the anti-inflammatory. CBN is good for drowsiness. It's mildly psychoactive, but it as of the latest studies, because this is continuing to be studied all the time, we still have better medication for sleep right now than this would be. So the stuff that's already existing is having better outcomes and better results for folks. CBG, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer properties. It's not psychoactive. And CBC, anti-inflammatory, analgesic, bone stimulant, anti-cancer properties. I'm all about it. When people say marijuana is medicine, the CBDs are medicine. Yes. The psychoactive THC is not. That's for people to get high. And that's where the difference lies, right? And I don't think a lot of people know that. And right now, what is legal in Florida is the medicinal. And recreational is right around the corner. I'm not blinded to this, but we need to just have the information, right, so you can make good choices. And I forgot to mention this. I'm going to mention this now. I'm not here to judge or to moralize, by the way. Everybody has choices to make. But I want you to have the best information that you can so that you can make the best choices for you and for your families. So these are some of the medications right now that are out there and have been out there. Marinol, Sesamet, Syndros. These are CBDs and things that have been around already even prior to this law. And they've had some effectiveness for people with MS, with people with seizures, and have already been used for some time. I also want to get into how easy it is to get these things, and you can find all these ads. And here in Los Angeles, you got Happy Medical Center. This I thought was really cool, because some people also say that marijuana doesn't affect IQ, right? We hear about the IQ, but check it out. Are you feeling depressed? So I just had to throw that one in there, because it doesn't clearly affect, right. So if you're feeling depressed and you don't have a spell check, vape oil, right? The candies, the pre-made tanks, the medical centers that are opening up, and will continue to open up. I think we're going to see lots of those as we continue to move in the future. Now, I'm going to get into some things, some consequences of marijuana, and I want you to parallel this to something for me. Has anybody ever died of a nicotine overdose? Anybody ever heard of nicotine overdoses? A couple of you have? Okay. Very rare though, right? I mean, it takes a whole heck of a lot. Vast majority of people that die from nicotine-related things is not from overdoses. So run that in mind as we kind of run through this. And interestingly enough, when I get to this next slide, in fact, I'll tell you right now that the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. I did this same lecture at Belen Jesuit a few weeks ago, and there was a mom in the audience who is a pediatrician who called me yesterday because she's been working with a patient not knowing what this patient had until she went to this lecture and realized what she had, and she's suffering from this. In the states where marijuana is legal, they have been finding people that have been coming to the emergency room with severe abdominal pain, vomiting, and no answers. Couldn't find what was causing this in these folks, right? Losing weight, can't hold food down, constant, can't break the cycle, no medication was breaking it. They were all marijuana smokers. What cured this? Stopping smoking marijuana. Physicians don't know what the tie-in is yet. They're studying it. They're figuring out this is something that's very new. So they're in the process of exploration. But some people are coming down with this, and the only thing that takes it away is taking away the pot. Bless you. When we talk about what's an addiction, right? One of the things about addiction is changes the way a person thinks. So some of the folks, and I've seen this already here, by the way, in Miami with a few people, is somebody experiences this severe abdominal pain, throwing up, diarrhea, constant, nonstop. You figure out what it is. You stop smoking and it takes this away. You have somebody that says, I'm done. I'm not doing this again because this is horrible. Boom, and they're done. Then you have other people that are like, well, I'm going to find out how much I can smoke until that happens, and then I'll smoke to that point. Who do you think of those two people has the problem? Who does it until they get sick, right? That's an addiction. How much can I do without getting here? And if I get here, okay, I'll try it again. Or I'll clean myself for a month and then I'll smoke again and see if it happens again. Right? Two people get a DUI on the way home from work on a Friday night after going to happy hour. And by the way, that can happen to anybody. Anybody can have a couple of drinks and blow over the limit, right? It's not necessarily an alcoholic alone that gets a DUI. That can happen to anyone through a bad choice. Both of those people, one says, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. I'm never doing this again. And the other one says, I need a bar closer to home. Who has the problem, right? This is addiction. And remember, they didn't wake up that way. They didn't get that way after the first time. This was a buildup. And this is where you see the executive function, right? Because most other people would be like, I'm not doing this again. To get out of a DUI, to resolve a DUI is really expensive. And then the second one is even more expensive. So we have that. The psychosis. We're seeing more and more and more psychosis. In the last couple of years, I've met like 3 Jesuses, a couple of prophets, the owner of Miami International Airport, the owner of all of Coral Gables too, which I thought was pretty cool because that's a big piece of, that's a big community. And, you know, somebody that, you know, was out with his boys in Lincoln Road. Actually, this happened here in Lincoln Road a number of years ago. Smoked some weed with his friends. The next thing he remembers, he wakes up in a psych hospital, psychiatric hospital, right? So we come to learn that somewhere along the way, he was with his friends and they left him alone because he was high. He got a hold of a taser gun. He doesn't know how he got a hold of a taser gun, and went to where the bus stop is, right there on Lincoln Road. And when the bus driver pulled up, he gets, you know, the people come off, he gets on the bus, and he points the taser at the driver and says, "You need to take me to the Miami Seaquarium." The guy looks at him and he's like, "Get off the bus," right? And then he puts the taser up against him and he says, "I have to go free Lolita the whale, and if you don't take me, I'm gonna taser you." Maybe not with the taser, right? Well, but you know, psychotic break, and this young man has never bounced back. He continues to come in and out of psychosis, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. But it's just a little bit of weed. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? It's just a little bit of pot. Imagine how his family feels. He's got a brother, you know. These are very difficult things, and the stories can go on and on, right? So as we continue on this journey of It's Only a Little Bit of Pot, this is Mr. Daniel Juarez. He stabbed himself to death. So let me tell you what happened to him. When they did his autopsy after he died, after he killed himself, he came back with a level of 38.2 nanograms of THC, the active ingredient of marijuana, in his system. Now, what is 38.2, right? Because I asked that too, because the drug screens I utilize don't measure this way. So I'm gonna give you a comparison. In Colorado, under the law to not get a DUI, the limit on a DUI in nanograms for marijuana is 5. Okay? So anything above 5 is considered over the legal limit to drive. So he's at 38. So that's a monstrous amount. That's like smoke the forests amount of marijuana. It's a lot of marijuana. But what is it that happened to him? Police and the witnesses say that he literally ran wild, stripping off most of his clothing and running into his nearby apartment. There he got a knife, stabbed himself 20 times, one of the stab wounds piercing his heart. His autopsy report lists his manner of death as suicide with, quote, marijuana intoxication as a significant condition. Marijuana was listed as a contributor as to the cause of death. But what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of pot. My suspicion as a clinician is that this was either edible or dabbing. That's a huge amount. Not necessarily, no, they psychotic. Remember that marijuana is classified as a hallucinogenic drug, especially when you ingest it and it goes through the liver, right? We got the liver and we got the double whammy coming through, and it is affecting the levels that we're seeing. So here we have this next young man here. He shoots himself. He shot himself in Colorado, and his family is blaming his suicide on his ingestion of edible marijuana candies. His mom says it was a complete reaction to the drug about his Saturday night suicide. We don't know what the psychotic breaks are. We don't know what's going through the person's mind. We don't know what their reality is in that moment that they are killing themselves. And here you have somebody that clearly identifies for himself what it is that happened. Here we have this young man who committed suicide at the age of 17, and he actually left a suicide note behind. 3 weeks prior to his killing himself, he had a psychotic break, because of his marijuana use. And he wrote it right there. Sorry for what I have done. I wasn't thinking the night I smoked myself out. He himself knew what he did to his mind, and he couldn't live that way, and he chose to end his life because of the effect of the THC. But what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of pot. This one's also very sad. They're all very sad. Here we have Richard, husband and father of these 3 kids, right? So what happened to him? Richard came home after having a pot-laced Karma candy, orange ginger, Tootsie Roll-like chew candy. And when he got home, he burst through the door ranting about the end of the world. He began climbing in and out of the first floor window, lying on the bedroom floor, asking for someone to kill him. He then retrieved a pistol from his safe, and he gathered his family in the living room, and he shot his wife, the mother of the children, in front of the 3 children. It was just a candy. It's the big deal. So these children, in essence, lost both their parents, right? And the kids now, they're a little bit older, and actually somebody came on their behalf, and they actually opened the first wrongful death lawsuit. They're aware that they're probably not going to win, and they're not doing it to get money. They're doing it to get the attention for people to see what can happen from this and what it can cause. Next, we have Mr. Andy Zorn, who he hanged himself, and he also wrote a suicide note. And there's what he wrote: "Marijuana killed my soul and ruined my brain." Self-identified that marijuana led him to make this decision over the course of time, right? In the beginning, it's fun. It's not so fun anymore as time progresses. So no, nobody's ever died of a marijuana overdose. That's correct. And like this, folks, there's more and more that we can talk about. Is marijuana a gateway drug? I'm going to say that in my perspective and in my belief it is. And what I mean by that and why I feel it to be that is because a gateway drug is any drug whose use can lead to other things. Now, not everybody that smokes marijuana, it doesn't mean that everybody that smokes marijuana is going to do something else. However, my experience, again, and I'm holding on to my 15, 16 years here of doing a lot of evaluations of people that are doing all different kinds of substances. When I do the evaluation, I always ask, if there was alcohol or marijuana use. And all with the exception of one so far in my career have started with alcohol and marijuana. So I would say that, yes, it is. It's not an equal two-way street. It doesn't mean that everybody that smokes pot is going to do cocaine or ecstasy or Xanax or anything else. But what I have seen is that people that do cocaine, ecstasy, Xanax, and other things started with marijuana and alcohol. And that reached the point that, okay, this isn't high enough. I need more. I want more. I want to see what else is out there and then head to those next spaces. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So why do some people move on to other substances? One, I firmly believe that once a person becomes accustomed to marijuana, there might be a curiosity of trying other things, so that definitely would be one. As we talked about in one of the previous lectures as well too, I think genetics plays a role, what the family history is. We're all predisposed to something from our families, and all that means is that we may or may not have the gene, but if we do have it and we do something to activate it, that person's going to develop a problem faster than maybe another person would. Self-medicating any underlying issues, there's a lot of correlation between substance use and other mental health issues, depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, learning disabilities, trauma sometimes, right? So it could be a self-medicator. I also firmly believe that once substance use passes the quote-unquote social, that it's serving a greater purpose, and we have to get into what that greater purpose is in order to heal from that space, so that we reduce the likelihood of the person self-medicating themselves. Somebody who's smoking marijuana, it's easier to be in contact with people that are doing other things. So sometimes it's just ease of access, it's there and it's present, that some people move on to different things. Now, part of the marijuana too, that in part of what creates the addiction, heavy cannabis users have lowered dopamine release in the brain. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that we have naturally occurring in our brains, and it's one of the ones that makes us feel good or helps us to feel good, or when we feel good, we secrete it, right? So here you have the differences in the brain, and it talks about a lower release, and I would add to that too, I think the sensitivity to dopamine also is reduced, because when you get used to it being up here with a substance ingested that creates it up here, when you come back to here, that was your normal before, you're just not feeling it. You're feeling sad, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling whatever, that we need to get that elevation back up. So I think it's a combination of factors, and the brain responds to what we do to it. So is marijuana addictive? Let's look at the numbers, because numbers don't really lie. So recent data, 2015, suggests that 30% of those who use marijuana may have some degree of a marijuana use disorder. It doesn't mean necessarily dependence, right? But remember, it's on a spectrum. It's something that's progressive. It's something that moves over the course of time. Real important one here. People who begin using marijuana before the age of 18 are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop a marijuana use disorder than adults. That's a huge number. And why? Why are the chances higher? Yep. The microwave isn't done yet with the cooking. Now, for the young ones in the room, my daughter saw, she nodded, right? You got it. That does not mean wait until 18 till you smoke, okay? Let me clarify that. These are numbers and these are stats. This is something that I definitely do not recommend at any age. About 1 in 6 people who start using as teens, and 25 to 50% of those who use it every day become addicted. That makes sense. The more you do something, the younger age, and if you're doing something every day, we can, I think, safely say that this is a problem. Right? Marijuana use disorders are often associated with dependence. Studies suggest that 9% of people who use marijuana will become dependent, rising to about 17% of those who start using in their teens. Again, I find 17% to be a pretty significant number. And the numbers with marijuana that we're seeing insofar as dependence is running pretty parallel to the numbers we're seeing for dependence for alcohol as well. It's estimated that, the studies will vary a little bit, but they're going to hold between 9 and 12% of the population has an alcohol dependence issue, and about 9 to 12% of the population has a marijuana dependence issue. So it'll fluctuate between those areas. So what we're looking at is in 2015, about 4 million people in the U.S. met the criteria for a marijuana use disorder. And I can vouch from the practice that I'm in and where I was in my previous employment before having this practice. It really pretty much it parallels to what it is that I have seen and have lived. So when we look at, is a substance addictive, one of the things that we assess is there withdrawal symptoms associated with it? And there are. I have already met and come across 3 people that have been hospitalized for marijuana withdrawal. Folks, years ago, this would not happen, right? And what are the things that they were experiencing? We have the physical, the stomach discomfort, headache, sweating, chills. And these 3 individuals that were hospitalized were actually all hospitalized for cardiac and blood pressure issues, which was attributed to the THC withdrawal, okay? And all young, all under the age of 25. The bigger symptoms that we see are these right here, especially the restlessness and the irritability. Boy, when somebody's coming off of weed, that's not a problem and it's no big deal. It's just a little bit of weed. The ability to cope, remember, because they've been up here, up here, up here, up here. When it comes back here, it's really dropped substantially, because from a level of what I used to feel as a 2, on a stress level, after all of this weed and after all of this, the same thing can happen, but I feel it as a 7 because I've gotten my brain so used to having this outside stuff that can't cope with it anymore, can't cope with the most minimal things. I mean, something as simple as the phone shouldn't be here, it should be here. But it's like huge meltdown. And it's like, all right, it's no big deal, just move it over, we're okay, relax. And it's like, what's wrong? And it comes to this. These are also very big right now when a person stops using. The anxiety levels through the roof. And it's back to the coping. The brain has become adjusted and accustomed to having the weed in the system that a person no longer knows how to deal with it. They've been suppressing it for so long that not only does the stuff we've been suppressing catch up to us, the new stuff is added to it with minimal coping skills. Okay, so what are some signs and symptoms? Here we have some signs and symptoms. We've got the physical, which is our tolerance, consequences, and continued use. The consequences are really big. It's like what I said. You get a DUI, right? That example, and it's like, oh, I'm going to find a bar closer to home. For a lot of times people respond to consequences, right? Here we look for ways to negotiate. And then we have emotional problems, family conflicts, psychiatric, big, relationship, legal, financial, medical, employment, social. And I want to come back here to the psychiatric. I spoke to 3 different psychiatrists today and consulting on a couple of cases and people families that we're working with, and it's gotten so very complicated because this onion, there's so much to peel, but it's just a little bit of pot. Why is there so many people involved in this? So I'm going to run some numbers for you real quick. So we've got our friends in Denver. So I'm going to give you some really interesting facts. There's 202 McDonald's in Denver. There's 322 Starbucks in Denver. There's 940 marijuana dispensaries. Right? Is there something a little off about this? Right. Homeless shelters. In 2012, there was about 28,000 people a month moving through the homeless shelters in Denver, right? In 2015, that number has jumped to 42,000. Okay, so let's kind of look at this right here. In 2009, medical marijuana was approved. In 2013, recreational was approved. Okay, so let's do a little tie-in here. 20 to 30% of newcomers came to Colorado for legal marijuana. Now, different types of people here. There's people here that migrated to Colorado where they could smoke weed legally and not get in trouble because they were also dependent on other substances. They could have been using Xanax, heroin, and probably the vast majority, and I'm making an assumption at this point, so don't quote me on this one. This is just an assumption based on my thoughts and ideas clinically from this, is that a lot of them were probably part of the opiate epidemic that we're living. So their goal was to go to a place where they could smoke pot and get off of everything else, right? And I will tell you the vast majority, unfortunately, were not successful because of the homeless population in Denver, Colorado. They have the highest amount of graduate, PhD, and professional homeless people in the entire United States. So it's people that are suffering from the disease of addiction, right? Good people, intelligent people, but they suffer from this, that with best of intentions move there thinking that they would be able to be successful smoking pot and leaving all the other drugs and get to work and get their life in order. And unfortunately that for some may have happened, for the vast majority hasn't. So very highly educated homeless in Denver. So let's look at the I Drive Better high, right? So, what we have, impaired driving, marijuana-related traffic deaths, not accidents, deaths, increased 48% between 2013 and 2015. But I drive better high. I don't know about that. Overall traffic deaths increased by 11%. So again, Some of you that have been in the other lectures, you know numbers are not me, 1 + 1 = 11, you know, I don't get that, but these are significant enough that they stand out to me. In 2009, marijuana traffic deaths were about 10% of people tested positive. In 2015, 21%, so that number doubled. There is a blood test, you know, because I've had people tell me they're not going to know I'm high. Pot stays in your system for 30 days, so they can drug test me and I can say I smoked 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, yeah, but you know what? Your blood will say it, that it's active. Now what? Right? It's all about how do I get around it. So that's how they know if the THC is active in the system. And by the way, there's places working, you know how they have the breathalyzer for the alcohol? They're working on something for the marijuana that when they pull you over, they'll be able to know at the same time. So that's being worked on as we speak. In 2015, driving under the influence of drugs, the arrests, 77% involved marijuana and another substance, 40% was marijuana alone. So the youth in Colorado, the youth past month use was 74% higher in Colorado than the national average, right? In a place where it's legal. It's not legal for this age, but nonetheless, you know, perceived risk. And college-age youth increased at 17%. So in Colorado, it's 62% higher than the national average. Again, you know, numbers reflect. What are some of the issues that the high schools are dealing with in Colorado? Remember, every student in high school is not old enough to be purchasing or consuming this. So what they're finding is that 45% are high during school, 43% are in possession of marijuana, and then we have the edibles. And what the schools are dealing with, 62% of the drug expulsions and suspensions were for marijuana, and 63% of total suspensions were for marijuana. So a lot of time being spent on that. And by the way, everything is referenced here, and I have a quick reference guide for you with these websites where you can see these numbers. So where is the youth obtaining the substances? 45% from friends who obtain it legally, 24% from the black market, 22% from their parents, 6% from dispensaries, and 2% from retail stores. So this is where they're getting it. And just to give you some emergency room visits, in a one-year jump, 14,000 to about 18,000. The ED visits likely related to marijuana use increased by 49%. People don't walk into an emergency room usually and say that, you know, it's drug-related unless, you know, it's an overdose or something. Same with alcohol. People will come to an emergency room because they fell off the roof, but they don't say that they were drunk when they fell off the roof. So some of this is the perception of the emergency room staff. And hospitalizations related to marijuana, 2011, 6,300, and 2014, just to hop across, 11,000 plus. So that's what we're seeing. And treatment admissions, approximately 6,500 people for marijuana, that's substance abuse treatment programs. In the 60s and 70s, you wouldn't see people going to treatment, the need for treatment for marijuana. It just wasn't an issue, really. You know, it was 2 to 3% THC. So these numbers really indicate that some people do have a dependency problem and do have an addiction problem. So, and just real quick, I don't go into all the numbers in Washington State. This is it. We all know Washington State is where Starbucks was founded, right? Has anybody been to the original Starbucks in Pike Place? Hey, excellent. Did you like it? It was cool, huh? Right. So how many Starbucks are there? 559. It's expected in Washington. 326 McDonald's. They really like that. And 735 dispensaries. So, you know, same's going to happen here. We're not any different. So what do you need to know? What you need to know is that history repeats itself. We're going to be, my speculation is that we're going to be living something very similar again. And what we need to know is that this is not true. If it's legal, it must be safe. Absolutely not. That's not true. Because the substances that are killing the most people in this country is alcohol, tobacco, and prescription drugs. And guess what? All of those are legal. Just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's good for you, okay? So I did this research, and I got a kick out of this because it's when cigarettes first became popular. And when cigarettes first became popular, they thought it would cure 36 diseases. So here are some of the ads we had, right? We have Dr. Batty's asthma cigarettes, right? Effectively treats asthma, hay fever, foul breath, all diseases of the throat, head colds, canker sores, bronchial irritations. And I think cigarette smokers couldn't spell either because it's canker sours, but you know. And here's the best part and really important. Not recommended for children under 6. So if you're 7 or older, smoke because it's gonna help you with all of these things right here, right? What do you think of the pregnant lady? Yeah, the smooth taste expectant mothers crave. How cool. Hey, right? Talk about, you want to kick in the labor, right? And more doctors smoke cigarettes than any other. That's what we need to know, right? So then we have, you know, our little baby boys here. I say, nah, my dad would never smoke anything but a Marlboro. Viceroys, this is the one that the dentists, they prefer that over Camels. The doctors, the MDs want Camels, your dentist wants Viceroy to keep your teeth clean. And you know, here Chesterfield is the one that's really best for you. They got the scientific evidence to show why it's good for you. And then we have this also, you know, an addictive substance, and this is great because I do engage in psychotherapy, and Xanax on the street is called bars, which is alcohol in pill form. So when people abuse that, you know, the last thing I want to do is have a session with somebody that's barred out. Really not a lot of fun to do that, and occasionally the person becomes violent while it's supposed to calm you down. It has the opposite effect. Valium, again, another one. And here we have cocaine toothache drops. I'll tell you what, if I'm putting cocaine on my tooth and my tooth hurts, I think I'm going to forget about the pain of my tooth, right? But here, you know, cocaine is the way to go. You'll forget the pain on your tooth. So in conclusion, I hope you got a kick out of that because I just thought that was just amazing to me of you know, the way, and I'm sorry I'm going to say I believe money drives these things. It has been known for a long time that the tobacco industry knew the dangers of the nicotine being put in the cigarettes. And they started upping the amount of nicotine, right, to increase the addiction because nicotine is a very, very addictive substance. So that they exploited it and people got hooked on this very dangerous habit. And I'm very, very scared because I think pot's going in absolutely the same way. We have all this good news about it right now and all the things that it does that it's wonderful, that I'm scared we're going to go down the line. And I would be doing this an injustice if I didn't take a moment to speak about the opioid epidemic and the pain medication that now we have in Miami-Dade County, 5 people dying every day from opiate overdoses. That's not the number of overdoses happening a day in Miami, that's the number of deaths related to opioids. And again, we've got our friends in the pharmaceuticals, all of this stuff that they knew, and right now there's a lot of lawsuits and a lot of things going on related to this that have left people addicted to these substances and then took them away with no support, that they have turned to heroin to deal with their addiction. And what are people dying of? I want to take, again, a moment to talk to you about this. This is how much heroin is needed for an overdose for a person to potentially die. And the drugs here now are being laced with fentanyl and carfentanil, and that's what's killing people. Some people know that their drugs are laced, some people do not. I don't know, in the back you probably can't even see how many little grains are there, right? Can you in the back even notice? And people in the front, you can't even notice, huh? There's one little grain right here. That's all you need is one little grain. I went to 9 funerals last year of people between the ages of 18 and 25. I can't do that anymore. I cannot do that anymore. There's not even a word for it, right? You have children that lose their parents, they're orphans. You have a spouse that loses a spouse, you've got a widow or a widower. There is no term, there is no word in our vocabulary for a parent that loses a child. Anybody realize that? There's nothing. Shouldn't be happening. Another thing that terrifies me, and this has happened in a few places in the country, and by no means am I trying to be dramatic or scare anybody, but I just want to be very realistic. If they start lacing the marijuana with this, I'm terrified as to what can happen. Because you can't see this. And I've had too many people tell me, you know, I took this, but it's an ecstasy pill, and I hold up the drug screen, and it's lit up like a Christmas tree. We've got crystal meth, heroin, MDMA, and look at, I didn't use any of that stuff. Your stuff was laced. Impossible. What do you mean impossible? I trust my dealer. I've met people who has a problem and who doesn't, right? I carry a test kit in my car. I'm good. Everybody does. I have one in the trunk of my car. Don't you have a really? Please. Fentanyl is 5 to 100 times more potent than morphine, and morphine is a very potent painkiller. Carfentanil is 10,000 times stronger than morphine. Carfentanil, folks, is an elephant tranquilizer. We are nowhere near the size or weight of an elephant. And that's what they're lacing the drugs with, and that's what people are dying from. Did we hit all of this? It's natural. It's a plant. God gave it to us. It's not natural or a plant anymore. It's all hydroponics and grown this way. Weed is not addictive. No one has ever died from a weed overdose. That's correct, right? But people do die under the influence. It's even coming out on autopsy reports. It's not a gateway drug. It's medicine. I never drive drunk. It's legal. Right? I think we covered them all. So what to do? Definitely educate yourself, and I'm very grateful and honored that you came out here tonight to learn this information and to gather this information. Knowledge is power. Make good choices. Families, set clear limits. You're 100% entitled to say no. Doesn't matter what other people are doing, right? Our family values, our family expectations, our family rules are, and fill in the blank for what works for your family. You know best what works for your family. If there's a problem, please confront it. Prevention is easier than treatment. I'm in the treatment world, and I get asked every now and again, why do you come and do these kinds of lectures to prevent? You're killing your business. And my business is life. My business is people making good choices and avoiding this as much as possible, because prevention is easier than treatment. There's treatment and there's hope. Prevention is easier than treatment. I promise you. Treatment is hard work for everybody, okay? This is about life. Signs and symptoms, I went over those. I don't know why I doubled it up. Please remember that everything that you do, everything you do for your kids is love-driven. Every limit that you set is love-driven. Every rule that you impose is love-driven. Every consequence that they earn is also love-driven. Our kids have way too many friends or have enough friends. Important to be parents. Guys, peer pressure is really tough. Make good choices for you. There's some good excuses out there that you could use if it's around you. You know, I'm on antibiotics, my parents will kill me, they drug test me. Blame it on your parents, right? Parents, you're okay if they blame it on you, right? Yeah. My mom will kill me. Yeah. I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna scream tomorrow, and if I get caught, I lose my car. I get grounded forever. Hey, there's plenty of things that we can do and say. So please, 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 have your kids back. It's at the end of the day, it's love-driven. It's good choices. We got to put the helmet on the head, like we talked about the last time. So I honor you all for taking time to be here and allowing me to be here with you.
Thank you, Anna. Again, very, very informative, very stressful. I know I talked to many of you after these, and we're all like, so I can relate as my 17-year-old is sitting in the back of the room. So we have a few moments for some Q&A. Any questions for Anna? And handouts, by the way. We do have some handouts we'll give out to you on your way out, but are there any questions seeking any clarification? Yes.
Wait, hold on a sec. I know a case that a mom, thank you. I know a case of a mom that she smoked marijuana. And when her kid started to smoke marijuana, she says, listen, I don't like this, but I'm going to allow you, so don't do it outside. do it in the house, don't take my marijuana, and in case, like I prefer that you bring also your friends and do it in the house so you don't get caught outside. What, what you can do about it?
Well, I can respond to that, but when you say what can you do about it, do you mean that as maybe having your child going over there, or
Think about that parent's approach.
what do I think about that parent's approach? I'm not an advocate of that.
My daughter is the one that told me, and she was,
Okay. Okay.
she was horrified, and she told me,
Good.
but she loved her friends too.
Absolutely.
So what we can do, and that's one of the
Right.
things that now is happening, that you're here.
Yes, perfect. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to make sure I understood the question. I do not co-sign that at all for anybody and for any substance, because we have the same sometimes with alcohol of only drink at home and I'm going to teach you how to drink. One is when you have a parent that is using, it's very difficult to be that role model and to say to someone, do as I say and not as I do, because it's gonna come back to be very hurtful. Like, really, you serious? You expect of me something that you're not willing to do yourself, A. B, when you tell a teenager, only do this at home, you are sending the green light straight across. They don't only do it at home. They're going to do it outside of home, because then they're going to come home and you're going to be like, you came home high. I'm sorry, Councilwoman, you don't mind that either, right? Okay. And then too late, right? No, she didn't. We're role playing, I'm saying that to the camera. And then how can you come back and say, well, I told you you can only do it here. But no, but you said I could. Look, Mom, it was safe though, because it was at Maria's house and I didn't drive, I waited, so what's the big deal? I've had parents come to me. I'm working right now with a family. I'm helping a colleague with a family. And I've seen this a bunch of times too, that the parents have said you can only smoke on the weekends, and then when they come to me, they're smoking 5 times a week. So I said, so what do you want me to do? Get them to go back to smoking on the weekend, and my response is, you've come to the wrong place. Because I'm not here to teach a teenager to control their use, right? Once the rule is established, to come back and change it makes it very difficult. It's like we had given you permission, but now we changed our mind because you couldn't control it. And understanding the brain at the same time, a parent has to be aware that with a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, up until, I would even say mid-20s, that concept of, they don't know how to self-regulate. We need the black or white, because then to come back from that, I've heard kids say, really, you've been telling me this forever, you think you're going to do that now? I'm not doing that, and they don't follow through. So I am not an advocate of that in any means, because it does, and it gives permission to do that. And then adding the caveat, if you're going to smoke, you're not pinching my stash, right? Don't take my bud. You got to go buy your own. So you're signing off even on illegal, because even if it was legal, clearly it's probably a teenager. Wouldn't be legal for the teenager either. So, and so far as how your daughter, I think you have every right. It's great that she told you. I would validate that honesty. But to say you cannot go to so and so's house, and not because
She doesn't go,
Okay,
because she says, they look all stupid.
Okay,
They're
so
all high,
she's
they're
uncomfortable.
laughing. But,
Beautiful.
but, at the same time, it's like me,
Yeah.
that I know the mom, but I cannot say, like my daughter told me, because then my daughter is going to be like the snitch.
Sure. And you know what? If you're talking about an adult woman, it's up for her to discern. You put in your boundary and your limit where you feel it to be appropriate. We're not
No, I
talking
know
about
that,
a
yeah.
child, right? So if
Yeah.
your daughter's not, or son,
No, she doesn't like it. Thank God.
is not comfortable, so.
Any other questions or requests for clarification? Yes.
Because I know that weed was late. I'm asking why this weed now is so much stronger than the weed in the 60s and 70s, because I know that weed had to be laced with things sometimes too, so what's the difference?
What they're doing is they're growing different strains of it, and then they're mixing the strains, and then you have the hydroponics of it and the way that it's grown, some of the ingredients that are added, and now even the water sometimes, marijuana is categorized as a hallucinogen. They're melting acid stamps in the water and using that water to water the plants. And that's in the strains and in the chemistry now of the way that it's being grown, why it's not natural anymore. It's I don't know, there's over 500 different strains. There's an app apparently that will tell you all the different strains, and there's over 500, probably more. That changes every day. And now they're looking to make it stronger. There's a contest every year about the strongest weed.
Hi.
Hi.
You have experience with the kids once they've already been using, but I was
Yes.
just wondering, how do you counteract? I know my own teenagers at home see this glorification of marijuana in
Everywhere.
music, and I mean, they
Movies.
came across Disjointed on Netflix, that show, and so it's all very lighthearted and funny and relaxed. So very much glorified. So we're like these old
Weirdos.
people who don't know what they're talking about. How do you suggest, before this usage starts, of how do we counteract that so that it makes to relate to them?
That's a great question. Open and honest communication. Whenever you see the show or hear the music, talking about it, bringing some of this information to them, and most importantly, what is talking from your heart. How do you think your father and I would be affected if you started to do this? How do you think that would affect our family? Having them think of the emotional side and knowing that the teenage years are very selfish time in and of itself, right? Drugs, no drugs or whatever, of helping part of that executive function, which is to think of the big picture versus just the vacuum of just me. Parents are still the number one influence. It doesn't mean that they're not going to go out there and do something, but it reduces the likelihood of
I
that.
think the communication definitely helps, and thankfully we're not there to see anything of the opposite yet. But, and of course we hope not to.
Sure.
But it almost seems like it's, like that sounds good what you're saying, but it seems like it's not enough. It's everywhere. And we talk, every time a lyric comes on in the song, in some rap song, I talk, you can, when
Right.
you can understand what they're saying, or if I know the lingo,
True.
we try to talk about it, but I think still it sounds to teenagers like we don't know what we're talking
It
about.
can, but we keep talking because it sticks. Because you know what really fascinates me when I get them away from mom and dad? The stuff that you all tell them does stick. They're just not going to let you know.
I just feel like you just have to hope for the best with
No, of
that,
course not.
because
Yeah, I was laughing with someone the other day that went to the office, and we worked with him and his family about a year ago, and so they just stopped by just for, just do a quick family session. Everything was fine, and they were sitting down with one of the clinicians in our office, and I poked my head in, and I went up to him and I tapped him on the back. I'm like, dude, you work so hard. They finally changed. And all of them were laughing when they came in, almost strangling each other a year ago. And here we are a year later, laughing about that, and they were able to laugh about that. It stuck. It was there. It was there, and it is. We're swimming upstream. We're swimming up against many things, but talk till you're blue in the face. Keep talking and talk from the heart. And when that lady shared back there about her daughter came home and told her, you validate the honesty. Thank you for telling me that, because that takes courage.
I think that they should have you go in the schools here also. I think that you should go to the actual schools and talk.
They are. We have a partnership, and we are bringing Anna and Rhea Stefania into the public schools to speak to the kids. But I was just going to suggest, I had been a school site administrator and a teacher for many years, a long time ago, and parents used to say to me, well, they're teenagers now, so I want to give them some freedom. I want to back off a little bit. And I would always say, you need to get even closer. That doesn't mean you're watching them like a hawk. You need to have more in-depth conversations. You need to
I find
talk
that
more
with
frequently. So step closer to your children as they get older, not further away. You're just not, you don't need to be with them 24/7, but they absolutely need to hear you in their head.
I just find that with that, it still opens up a lot of dialogue for the opposition. You just have to keep talking and hope for the best, but it seems like that's all right.
Just real quick, in addition to talking, what's your feeling about random drug testing?
Oh, I'm all about it.
So you don't think that makes the relationship worse, or can you just speak to that a little bit?
I can. Privacy is a privilege. You can quote me. Privacy is a privilege. Absolutely. It serves a couple of different purposes, right? Is one, from the place of refusal skills, I think it can be helpful to be like, hey, I might be drug tested at home. And number two, I think it's something important of being a part of a family and being at home, that if you feel that that's important and there's nothing to hide, then, you know, we willingly will do the drug test. It's a very precarious time. It's a very scary time. And especially if there's a reason to or a suspicion, absolutely, I would do it. And I would also say that, you know, and this part isn't fun, but go in the bathroom with them and watch, because, you know, there's water, there's dilution, there's soap, there's Visine. There's a bunch of stuff that can get mixed in there, and then all of a sudden the pee isn't warm enough and it's very clear. And I've seen orange pee too, and I'm like, what is this, right? You can do the hair samples as well. That gives about a 90-day window of anything that's in there too. And in fact, some of the private schools that I work with in my area, like Christopher Columbus, for example, they do hair samples. And Palmer Trinity is looking to implement hair samples as well too, as part of their testing, and really doing it from a helpful place, because if there is a problem with substances, we're better off knowing in high school versus in college when they're away. You know, exactly, I don't. That's a great question. I don't, sorry. I know that the shampoo that they sell that's for horse something or other doesn't work. People think that it works to clear out and it smells really bad. Yeah.
You showed the pictures of the brain with the brain damage. I have learned about cigarette smoking, that if you were a smoker and then you quit, 10 years later, your lungs may look relatively healthy as if you hadn't smoked, because the lung tissue regenerates. Does that happen in the brain too, or once the brain is damaged, like the screenshots you showed us, is it permanent damage?
Yeah, it depends on where it is. There is, like, for one of the good places that it does come back and it takes time to regenerate is in the pleasure areas, insofar as the dopamine piece leveling out. And there's certain parts of the brain that will, and other parts of the brain that may not. And I can't speak to you specifically right now about which parts will and which parts won't. I know the dopamine, the reward, will. The executive function can definitely improve. The substance, which substance was abused, is going to play a role. And some of the alcohol damage is irreversible, and there's organic brain changes with alcoholism that will not come back, and they call it wet brain. And that's also very sad to see.
In terms of marijuana with the THC and the
CBDs.
So you might have some regeneration, but there will also be some permanent damage?
Potentially, there could be. There could be. A lot of it can come back with THC over time. Over time, some people will stay with some permanent impairment, but it usually will bounce back.
What's the time frame? 10 years,
It takes
20?
it takes about 9 to 14 months from a chemical perspective for the brain to come back into a natural state of homeostasis, and some of those other things may take up to 2 or 3 years.